All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I believe that it was in the year 1919 when the Boston Red Sox traded Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. And when they performed that act, baseball history was changed forever. Because had they kept Babe Ruth, who knows? Maybe they would be the franchise with 27 world championships. I doubt it. But hypothetically speaking, you never know, because Babe Ruth is the transcendent player who got the New York Yankees history, who got their preeminence started. And of course, Babe Ruth rolled into Lou Gehrig, who rolled into Joe DiMaggio, who rolled into Yogi Berra, who rolled into Mickey Mantle. And all the way up to today, the New York Yankees have 27 world championships, and the Boston Red Sox have, I believe, 4 or 5 titles. They won in 2004, 2007, and 2013 with Big Papi. And I believe they also won with Babe Ruth in 1916 and 1918. So they have 5 altogether. But once again, their decision to trade Babe Ruth, who at the time was already the best player in the major leagues, I believe that he was a star pitcher and also may have led the league in home runs his last year with the Boston Red Sox. That totally changed the history of both teams. And it's taken a long time for the Boston Red Sox to catch up. I believe one of the main reasons why the Boston Red Sox have not only caught up to the Yankees, but pretty much have surpassed them, is because they finally embraced the player of color. And the Red Sox were not the only team in the American League who took a very long time to embrace the great players of color, quote unquote players of color, that were coming from the Negro Leagues. I'm trying to remember exactly who their first prominent so-called black baseball player was. If I remember correctly, the first so-called black baseball player on the Yankees was Elston Howard, who came in the mid to late 50s. But the Boston Red Sox, they had Dave Parker in the 80s. They had Mo Vaughn in the 90s. And they finally brought in the New York native Manny Ramirez, as well as the great Big Papi, and that's when they started to climb. And let me not also forget the great Pedro Martinez, who was the most dominant pitcher of the juice ball, small ballpark, steroid era in the mid-90s. I mean, oftentimes we're fond of saying that the home run and RBI totals of the top sluggers in the 90s was inflated. Well, if the numbers of hitters was inflated in the 90s, that means that the great pitchers were actually greater than we even understand. Pedro Martinez, in my view, may be one of the most underrated all-time great overall baseball players with the way that he was able to dominate in the steroid era. But anyway, Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman are going to chop it up over whether or not the Red Sox franchise has surpassed the Yankees. And of course, I'm going to chime in.
Well, Boston sports fans certainly aren't void of success. This is their 4th World Series appearance in the last 15 years, 13 overall. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, you big New Yorkers. I know this is sacrilegious for you, but are the Red Sox poised to overtake the Yankees as the best franchise in baseball?
Well, let me say this first off, and I've already lightly touched on it. The New York Yankees, their destiny changed when they acquired Babe Ruth. But let's be very clear, as Stephen A. Smith would say. The New York Yankees, for the most part, were able to dominate before the era of quote-unquote integration. Now, we know that Jackie Robinson was the first so-called black baseball player in the pseudo-modern era in 1947. And then the Cleveland Indians, I believe, brought in Larry Doby. In the National League, the Pittsburgh Pirates, they brought in Roberto Clemente. And the Giants, they brought in Willie Mays, I believe, in 1951. Of course, the Milwaukee Braves, they brought in Hank Aaron in the early 50s as well. The Chicago Cubs brought in Ernie Banks, I believe, in 51 or 52. So, for the most part, a lot of the success of the New York Yankees under Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, Mickey Mantle, that was in a predominantly Caucasian league. It wasn't until the early to mid-60s that you started to see many of these transcendent black ball players get an opportunity. The Frank Robinsons, the Bob Gibsons, so on and so forth. The names go on and on and on and on. And of course, the Caucasian players, they were phenomenal as well. But what we were seeing from the Yankees in the 20s and 30s and 40s, those were not the best baseball players in the world. Those were the best Caucasian players, oftentimes just east of the Mississippi, because it was very difficult to even scout west of the Mississippi back in the 20s and 30s. That was one of the main reasons why the Yankees were so successful, was because of their scouting program. They were able to go scout Joe DiMaggio, who I believe was from the Bay Area, all the way out in California. They were able to go scout Yogi Berra, who I believe was from the St. Louis area, all the way back out in the 40s. So that gave them a decided advantage. So when I compare the New York Yankees and their legacy to other teams, I normally start from that 1977 World Series championship team. So the Yankees so far, they won in 77, they won in 78, they won in 96, they won in 98, they won in 99, they won in 2000, and they won in 2009. So they have 7 world titles in the modern era. The Boston Red Sox have 3 world titles in the modern era. That's how I compare it, because when you start talking about 27 world championships to 5 world championships, once again, you have to factor in all of these other issues.
Certainly in the 21st century, it makes me sick to say it. Really, it's like poison. It tastes like poison.
Wow, Max.
But you have to say it. In the 21st century, look, this will be their 4th World Series win. Also, the Red Sox they're for the first time ever in the same in the same league, 3 teams won at least 100 games. The Red Sox just polished the other 2 off. 108 wins and just beat 2 100-win teams. Their arch-rival Yankees and the defending champion Houston Astros. And they did it without having to go 7 games.
This is very big of you.
Or 5 games. The first one, no one took them to the limit.
I'm very
well, bottom line is I'm very, very small because I'm not going.
Somebody needs to make a meme of that.
Going that direction. And the reason why I'm not going that direction, Max Kellerman, is because unlike you, I'm answering the question. She asked, what was the question?
The question is, are the Red Sox...
Stephen A. Smith, are you sure that you're going to answer the question? I'm not even quite sure if you understand the question itself. And I'm pretty sure that Stephen A. Smith is the one who came up with the question and is just using it as a platform to try to push his Yankee fanboyism. The strangeness of this dynamic right now is that it seems as though Max Kellerman understands the question better than Stephen A. Smith. But let's see what they have to say.
Poised to overtake the Yankees.
I don't recall her saying in this millennium. I don't recall her saying in this decade. She asked the question. Did you say this decade? Did you say that? Did you specify? Thank you. Which means that I get to take into account history.
No, sir, not quite. If the question is, are the Sox close to surpassing the Yanks as the best franchise in Major League Baseball, what's intrinsic within that question is that we're considering the modern era. That's what's intrinsic within that question, because if we're going to talk about which franchise has the best legacy, then the question would have to state something along the lines of which franchise has the best overall legacy. Not are the Sox close to surpassing the Yankees as the best franchise in Major League Baseball. For example, the San Francisco 49ers, they have, 5 world titles. But most people would consider other franchises right now in football to be above the 49ers. Especially up and until they finally hired Mike Shanahan. Or an even better example, the Los Angeles Lakers in basketball. They have a far better history than the Golden State Warriors. But right now, if you were to ask, are the Golden State Warriors close to surpassing the Lakers as the best franchise in the NBA? I'm sure that most people who are paying attention to the question and who are paying attention to what is currently transpiring in the NBA would say, yes, the Golden State Warriors are a better franchise than the LA Lakers.
You're blasphemous stuff. How dare you? How dare you? 27 world championships. All right, you're having a good decade.
Are you trying to go to Boston?
You're having a good decade.
2 decades.
All right, fine. 2 decades. Now, damn it. And don't take it. Well, how many World Series titles they have? And last time I checked,
they have 5.
4 in the last 18 years.
All right, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, 3 in the last 18 years. 5 overall.
That's right. All right, for the moment, they got the edge. But that ain't what she asked. And you should be looking for some wiggle room not to answer that question in the fashion that you did. You have just betrayed. You have just betrayed New Yorkers. Because you sat up there, you know it right. You betrayed New Yorkers.
Let me explain.
You use the Yankees whenever you can as the
You are
standard.
betraying New Yorkers right now.
How?
You are.
How?
Because I have to give them the medicine. It doesn't taste good, but you got to get it. You got to.
I agree, sir. The only way to allow a person or an entity to even attempt to rectify the bad condition that they're in is to tell them the truth.
You got to take it because
you have to answer the question.
Right now, the issue.
She didn't answer right then.
I just said yes. They're poised to do it. Yes.
Yeah.
How do you answer the question?
Well, because my point is,
how do you answer the question?
Excuse me, they got 20. The Yankees have 8 World Series, 27. Ain't that right?
That's right.
How many Boston hats?
Now, four. In the last 100 years, 4.
In the last 100 years, 4. And the Yankees got 27. Okay, it's a little moment in the sun.
Yankee fans, they sound so ridiculous when they start ranting and raving about 27 world titles. How many did you see? That's what you should be concerned about. It's like someone who happens to be a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you're less than 45 years old, I don't want you telling me about Lynn Swann and John Stallworth and Terry Bradshaw. Stick to what you saw. Tell me about Big Ben and Antonio Brown and the Bus, Jerome Bettis, and those guys. Stick to that.
It's a little moment in this. That don't take away from an historical perspective. No, for the moment, yeah, I gotta concede.
Here's the problem.
But listen.
Here's the problem.
Go ahead.
I'm the first one. Who's the greatest franchise in the history of American team sports? The Yankees. Of course.
Well, they're certainly the most successful.
But, Stephen A., since the turn of the new century, it's almost 2 decades old already. Yankees got 1 chip. 1. They won in 2000, but if you start counting 2001.
Isn't it interesting, ever since Major League Baseball started to balance out how much money you could spend in regards to acquiring players, the New York Yankees started to fall off in their world championships? In the mid to late 90s, they were spending so much more money than every other team. It was almost unfair. They were treating certain franchises in Major League Baseball like a farm system outlet. They were treating the Kansas City Royals and a lot of these other teams like a farm system outlet. And ever since Major League Baseball started to balance out the amount of money that you could spend on players, suddenly the New York Yankees have started to retract a little bit. And it has forced the hand of their GM, Brian Cashman, to show a little bit more ingenuity in regards to how he runs the franchise.
1 in 2009.
Very upset.
Matt, best franchise in baseball?
Right now, so here's the issue. The Red Sox, the day they hired Bill James, the godfather of sabermetrics, I was actually on Around the Horn. That's how long ago this was.
Oh my gosh.
I predicted then they were going to win 3 of the next 10 World Series. In year 10, they won their 3rd World Series. They're working on their 4th. They're likely to win 4 this year. They're going to be favorites in the World Series. And what did they do? They started playing Moneyball with money. They were the first huge market team to really go all in on analytics. Yankees had done it. They dipped their toe in the water. They were using them. But the Red Sox went all in. Forward thinking. When you, or as Stephen A., you would say, when you decry the use of analytics in sports.
That's not true.
Oh, yes, it is.
Well, baseball is the sport that lends itself the most towards analytics. It really is. That's the sport where you can have one of those stat geeks, and he can transform your franchise as long as he has a modicum of understanding on baseball. Baseball is the sport that lends itself the most to that style of rejuvenation of your franchise in regards to how it's run. The eye test really does not work that well in baseball if that's all you're using. Now, other sports lend themselves a little bit more to the eye test, but you should always have a healthy balance.
That's not true. That's not true.
Look what happens to those who get left behind.
I decry the dependency on it. I decry those who think all they have to do is sit at home and read, thinking they understand the game. That's what I decry. Pat Riley even used analytics as early as the late 80s into the 90s. Former players of his would tell you that. So I'm not averse to analytics by any stretch of the imagination. Just these fools out here who think they never have to watch the game and that they get to just read numbers and think they know the game. There's a difference. Now, to get to your point about the Red Sox and Yankees, let me be very, very clear. Of course, the Red Sox have an edge over the last 2 decades. I can't deny that. That's what I'm saying. But when you ask the question about, overtaking the Yankees in terms of sports annals and what have you, I'm like, wait a minute, no, I'm not giving you that. And by the way...
Right, but that's not really what the question is asking. The question is asking, are the Sox poised to surpass the Yanks as the best franchise in Major League Baseball? Meaning what? Are they being ran better today, Stephen A. Smith? Bro, please go drink your coffee, man. Do something that's going to help you be more alert.
The Yankees, it wasn't like, listen, they're not better than the Red Sox. We know that. But it's not like the Yankees fell off the map or what have you. It's not like they don't devoid of young talent. It's not like they can't turn it around and be in a position. As a matter of fact, I recall you predicted that the Yankees would win this series just like I did, and they ultimately lost. I'm saying that the Yankees are there. Yeah. They're relevant. They got 27 on their resume. The Red Sox got 4.
Who has more Super Bowl wins, the Steelers or the Patriots?
Steelers.
Steelers got 6, the Patriots 5. all-time historically, you could argue Green Bay, if you go pre-Super Bowl era, there are different franchises you could say are all-time historically greater than the Steelers. But if we were to ask, have the Patriots established themselves as the best franchise in football? Who's going to say no to that? Of course they have.
Agreed.
It's the same sort of thing. They're not the greatest franchise ever, but their dominance over the last 15 years means if you ask the question today, you have to say it. It makes me sick to say it, but it's true.
I feel you on that, Max, but the Yankees got 2000 and 2009. The Red Sox got 3. They're en route to 4. Overall, the Yankees got 27. The Red Sox have 4. All I'm saying is that, I give the Red Sox props for the moment.
Yep.
You're for the moment. You're on top. All right.
What does this come?
Once again, Stephen A. Smith, we have to evaluate these type of comparisons based off of the era. And to me, the modern era, where you start to compare the Yankees and the Red Sox in regards to their success or their proficiency overall, it really should start in the mid-'70s onward. And when you go from the mid-'70s onward, it's much closer than you think. Of course, if you're going to include Mickey Mantle and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio and those guys, of course, there's no comparison. Because the Yankees had much more money to spend even from back then. They had a far more intricate understanding on how to scout, and their farm system was better overall. But if we're talking about the modern era, starting from the mid-'70s onward, it's very close. And the Boston Red Sox, for the most part, were the better team all throughout the 80s. They just could not get over the hump. Of course, they lost that World Series in '86 to the Mets. In the late 80s, they ran into that buzzsaw known as the Oakland A's. So they ran into some difficulties. In the 90s, they drafted very well. They had Nomar Garcia-Power. Once again, they had Mo Vaughn. They were not successful until the early 2000s when they had the great Manny Ramirez and the even greater Big Papi.
What does this come down to? What did I say when the Yankees got eliminated? Brian Cashman does a very, very good job. Not good enough because someone else is
Max,
beating him.
I want
on
you
his
to look
watch.
in your camera and say the Boston Red Sox.
And let me say this. George Steinbrenner is the most overrated owner in the history of team sports. He gets so much credit, and he was a terrible owner. A terrible owner. As a matter of fact, the New York Yankees renaissance really started when George Steinbrenner was banned from baseball. That's when Gene Stick Michael was allowed to develop a lot of their great prospects in the minor leagues. The Derek Jeters, the Andy Pettitts, the Mariano Riveras. All these guys were allowed to develop when George Steinbrenner was suspended from baseball because he liked to trade away all their top prospects.
Bucks are the best franchise in baseball. Please do that. I want to keep that tape.
You just get a better pitch.
Oh, you're so loyal. I wouldn't expect this take from you.
I heard totally different.
But Yankees fans got to hear the news.
Speaking of success,
Well, anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how this story continues to develop in the oncoming years as we get a better opportunity to compare the moves and the machinations of the Boston Red Sox in comparison to the New York Yankees. So peace.